Hello, Alexander.
By the way, I was looking into our last conversation on Wikipedia. I was trying to clarify something.
And?
I discovered where Germany manufactured its armaments prior to the Second World War.
Where?
In Germany.
All?
Ships, tanks, and planes.
All?
Yes, that is precisely what interested me. Who exactly assisted them in restoring their military-industrial potential?
What do you mean? The Weimar Republic or Nazi Germany?
Nazis.
No one helped Nazi Germany.
Not even the Americans?
No, of course not.
They didn't invest in the development of the automotive industry, tank building, the steel industry?
They might have invested in the automotive industry, and we would need to check the documents, but certainly not in tank building.
Okay, fine.
I love it when you say that. Okay, fine. Do you have any other questions, Alexander?
I recently watched Alexei Isayev's lecture about Dunkirk. Do you happen to know that historian of ours by any chance?
Yes, I know of him.
Right, and I got the impression.
Then what did he say?
I got the impression that the war Germany waged against France and Great Britain was some kind of rigged game. The British are fighting, then they're pulling out, then they're going back. All in all, it was a strange kind of war.
Maybe you were listening to the wrong historian. Perhaps it was a weak historian?
Recommend one.
On the Second World War, unfortunately, you lack serious historians on that topic. And Isayev is not considered a serious historian, and I can even explain the reasons to you.
No, I asked you to recommend.
As I told you earlier, you unfortunately don't have any serious historians who specialize in the Second World War. If you want foreign ones, I can recommend some, but Russian ones? Unfortunately, no.
I don't know any foreign languages.
There are Russian translations of these books.
Which ones? German.
There are British ones. Little Heart. That's a classic book on the Second World War. I think it was written back in the 50s. You can read Churchill on the Second World War. He is a very good writer. Or rather, he was a very good writer. It's not for nothing he won the Nobel Prize in Literature. Well, it's something I can't remember right now, but if you want me to, I can. I'll give you a tip right now. This particular book by this author is definitely available in the Russian language. I'll find it now. Please, just wait for a moment. Okay, no, that's not what you're looking for, but there's a fantastic book, Hitler and Stalin. It's a true classic, a 2-volume set by Alan Bullock. This is a British book that is recognized as a classic biography covering both Hitler and Stalin. Although it was written a considerable time ago and many new documents have since emerged, they merely serve to further refine the existing details. So,
to be honest, I'm not really a big fan of the British. I don't trust them.
Well, that is called prejudice.
In all of Russian history, as they say, the British have been meddling. I mean...
Britain was messing with you, right? Messing with you, but that's nonsense. There's Max Hastings. All Hell Let Loose, The World at War, 1939 to 1945. It is quite a massive book, so there you have it.
No, I'm afraid that's not the case.
Well, there's Churchill, right. Churchill. You're not going to read Churchill. All right, then. What else is there to say about the war? About the war. Anthony Beevor. That's a true classic, the Second World War.
Vitaly, I apologize. I understand. Have you yourself read any of the materials you are proposing to me?
Of course, I've read Hastings, and I've also read Anthony Beevor's book, The Second World War.
Wonderful.
It's a very detailed account.
Then the question for me is, why did Great Britain and France allow Nazi Germany to strengthen its military industrial potential and capabilities?
I've already told you about this, Alexander.
You told me that Great Britain and France allegedly required reparations and, so to speak, financial resources from Germany to, as the saying goes, atone for their transgressions from the First World War. But the crux of the matter is...
You misunderstood me.
The military-industrial capital, the countries would never have received the profit that they had been counting on. They just...
Everything you've said is just a random collection of words. Forgive me, of course, for my emotional assessment of your work. There you have it. I can repeat it once more.
I remember very well what you said last time.
So why are you asking the same question again?
Because I don't agree.
Ah, the issue. Alexander, please understand, if you find yourself in disagreement, that is absolutely your right to disagree. But in order to genuinely disagree, one must read something beyond just Soviet textbooks to truly form an informed opinion. I doubt you've read anything besides Soviet textbooks. Well, that's just my assumption.
Well, of course, I can't really argue with you as a professional, but...
Well, you are certainly welcome to disagree. That is perfectly normal and acceptable, to have a differing opinion. From a layman to a professional. That's normal.
Listen, please tell me, last time I asked you a question regarding the German plan, Drang nach Osten, the push to the east. You mentioned that you are not familiar with it.
No such plan existed as a plan. Do you understand what a plan is? There's the concept of Operation Barbarossa. A document signed by Hitler on, say, December 18th, 1940. Clear. A plan. A signature. The Reich Chancellery's seal and Hitler's signature. That's Operation Barbarossa. But the Drang nach Osten plan, that's more of a Drang nach Osten, or a push to the east. Hitler himself wrote in Mein Kampf that he would advance eastward because the Germans lacked Lebensraum, or vital living space, and he intended to conquer that essential living space to the east of Germany. But an actual plan signed and sealed by the Reich Chancellery? No, of course not.
So in his book, Mein Kampf, he stated... He wrote about his desire to go east, which he later put into practice with the actual Operation Barbarossa.
He didn't just realize it in Operation Barbarossa.
That's the plan, since they read Mein Kampf.
He realized his plan not just with Operation Barbarossa, but also through the occupation of parts of Poland, because Poland lies to the east of Germany. It wasn't just Operation Barbarossa.
So that was his wish, that was the plan he had in mind, correct?
Well, of course, he repeatedly declared this in his speeches and rallies, articulating that the Germans lacked sufficient living space. There were many Germans, yet too little territory, so where could they acquire more land? Over in the east, those are primarily agricultural territories. The Germans will move there and develop those territories. And when they launched their attack on the Soviet Union, they even attempted to establish German colonies within the Volhynia region. They relocated Germans to those areas, displacing the local population from certain villages in Volhynia, and in practice attempted to establish their own German agricultural settlements. But that was a very short period because the liberation of these territories began. Hitler never concealed any of this. That he would go to the east, that he would fight against communism and so on.
Excellent. Vitaly, I want to say that you're a professional, you know this, but when encountering Ukrainian interlocutors, as it were,
you deal with Ukrainian interlocutors
about these plans that Hitler spoke about, I'm genuinely interested. Do they cover this topic in schools, or do they simply not talk about it at all?
What exactly?
Well, when studying the Second World War or the Great Patriotic War, what's written in Ukrainian textbooks?
Look, Alexander, you don't necessarily have to listen to me. I always direct people to the primary sources, present them with the relevant books, and so forth. We have a website, and it's called IMZO. In Ukrainian, it's known as the IMZO, which stands for the Institute for Modernization of Educational Content. This is a specialized state institution that announces competitions for textbooks in all subjects. It manages the process from start to finish. Indeed, the state granted these powers to this particular organization, and it is directly overseen by the Ministry of Education. And so, if you visit the website of this organization, you'll find that all the textbooks spanning from the 1st to the 11th grade across all subjects are readily available and published there. You just click on it and then it goes biology, geometry, physics, history, and so on and so forth. You can simply select any grade level and then access the textbook, which has already been published and distributed to schools in PDF format. It is available for free in PDF format since textbooks are provided to schools at the government's expense. Essentially, they are distributed without cost. And moreover, this textbook is available in PDF format, allowing you to personally open the 11th grade World History textbook and examine it. Not 11th, 10th grade. It's been moved to the 10th grade now. And there you can locate the Second World War and then examine precisely how it is illuminated within Ukrainian textbooks. No need to ask Ukrainians here, especially those who haven't read these textbooks. And there you will find a large final section in every 10th grade textbook covering the Second World War, and specifically the German-Soviet War as a component of that conflict. Here we have stopped using the name Great Patriotic War. That's the Soviet-era name, and it's also the modern Russian name. And you can read and discover everything that is being taught to our children. And all of this is verified just like that. Well, of course, you really need to put in some work and know a little bit of the Ukrainian language. However, these very same textbooks are also published in the Moldovan language, because here in our country these textbooks are released in the languages of national minorities. These textbooks are also available in Russian, as well as in Moldovan, Hungarian, Polish, and so on. You can find this same textbook in Russian, and in fact you wouldn't even need to translate it at all. Everything there is written in Russian, and you can formulate your own opinion on how it is presented in Ukrainian schools.
Comprehensive, thank you.
This information isn't hidden here, just like it isn't where you are, by the way. Incidentally, I possess nearly every textbook for the 10th and 11th grades from the year 2023. 2024 edited by Medinsky. I have never before read anything that was more absurd than that.
I actually like him.
You like him, you like him. Well, you haven't read these textbooks.
I haven't read the modern textbooks. I listened to his Dostoevsky lecture series.
Medinsky's?
Yes, he gives the lectures himself.
Are you seeing my reaction to Medinsky?
Well, that doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me at all.
Well, because you are openly falsifying and simply distorting the facts. You are aware of that, aren't you? Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And I can give you examples right now. You can check them online. When the first edition by Medinsky was published last year, there was a textbook for the 10th and 11th grades where it stated that the Chechens were quite fairly evicted, well, by Stalin. Stalin, you see, exiled the Chechens from their territories because the Chechens collaborated with Nazi Germany. This was simply printed in plain text, explicitly stated. Then, one of the officials from the Ministry of Education personally went to be reprimanded by Kadyrov. This was all filmed and is available on the internet, where he stated, yes, we made a mistake, and we have since corrected that error and removed the passage from this book which claimed that Chechens collaborated with Nazi Germany and that Stalin justly deported them. They simply falsified the information, and subsequently, under pressure from Kadyrov, they made alterations.
Wait a minute, are you saying the Chechens and the Crimean Tatars did not collaborate with Hitler?
Hitler, in fact, never even made it to Chechnya. Let's start with that particular point.
There was a flag on Elbrus. The flag was there.
And Elbrus is in Chechnya? I'm just asking. I confuse geography.
It's
all the peoples living in the occupied Soviet territory, meaning the part of the Soviet Union that was under Nazi German occupation, collaborated with Nazi Germany. The collaboration percentage was approximately calculated a long time ago. And there is an average statistical figure. And it's important to note that neither the Crimean Tatars nor the Chechens exceeded this average statistical figure for collaboration with Nazi Germany. You see, very often Russians tend to forget RONA, which stands for the Russian Liberation National Army, and absolutely nothing is known about the Lokot Republic. And most likely you also know nothing about the Lokot Republic.
I know about the ROA, but about the Lokot Republic.
Not the ROA, RONA. The ROA is Vlasov's Russian Liberation Army. It was only truly established in the spring of 1945, and as a matter of fact, it did not take part in anything anywhere at all. However, the Russian Liberation National Army, RONA, was actually the army of the Lokot Republic. Two corps were established based on this army, comprising two SS divisions, specifically Kaminsky's 29th Division and also the 30th Division. And the Russians also collaborated with Nazi Germany in approximately the same collaboration percentage, just like all the other peoples of the occupied Soviet territory.
No,
but the Russians weren't deported.
With Hitler?
All the peoples of the occupied Soviet territory collaborated with the Nazis. They did collaborate, but the collaboration percentage was no. He simply lied. He completely lied because he knew that...
Did they collaborate or not?
Well, I am answering you right now.
Did the Chechens collaborate?
I am indeed answering. The Chechens, along with other ethnic groups from the occupied Soviet territory, did collaborate. However, the Chechens and Crimean Tatars were subjected to deportation, whereas, for reasons unknown, the Russians were not deported. Similarly, the Ukrainians were not deported either. Even though we were under occupation from 42 to somewhere around 44. You see, they weren't deported. These groups allegedly collaborated extensively, but that is a complete lie. And this is the only instance where I find myself in full agreement with Kadyrov. Kadyrov called the ministry employees on the carpet, and they, bowing humbly, responded, "Our sincerest apologies, Ramzan Akhmatovich. We really messed up here, and we will rectify this," stating it was indeed a crime committed by Stalin in expelling the Chechens from their territory. Because deportation for collaboration is a typical Stalinist genocide justification, which was practiced by the Soviet government.
Well, they deported three groups of people: the Crimean Tatars, the Chechens, and the Volga Germans.
They deported the Ingush, the Kabardino-Balkars, and from Crimea it wasn't just the Crimean Tatars they deported. From Crimea, Bulgarians, Greeks, Gagauz, Krimchaks, and so forth were deported. You just don't know about this, which is why it seems to you that there were only three peoples. In reality, Stalin forcibly relocated about 10 or 11 different peoples, entire populations within the Soviet Union. And I'm not even counting the deportations from the bordering territories when everyone from those border areas was deported, regardless of their ethnic origin. The Stalinist regime deported, I believe, 10 or 11 peoples. I could be mistaken. You can check Wikipedia later. That is why, in your textbooks, certain pieces of information and specific dates are simply falsified. Ukrainian textbooks do contain errors, I won't deny that, but there isn't the same extensive falsification in Ukrainian textbooks as can be found in Russian textbooks. It happens.
Well, it happens. Everyone praises their own swamp.
It's one thing to praise your own swamp, but it's an entirely different matter to falsify the text of a textbook. And to try to justify one crime by committing another.
There was a deportation, that's a fact.
Yes, there was a deportation, but it wasn't a...
Yes, there was.
Collaboration did happen. I am trying to explain this to you again, Alexander, but it seems you're digging in your heels. I simply cannot comprehend the reasons why they collaborated with Nazi Germany.
Convince me that it's a falsification. I'm telling you the textbook describes actual facts. If they were to...
The textbook describes Stalin's lies and historical falsifications. The textbook states that the Chechens faced deportation due to their extensive collaboration with Nazi Germany. The Chechens and Crimean Tatars collaborated with Nazi Germany at the same rate proportionally as all other ethnic groups within the Soviet Union. Therefore, the statement in the text that they were deported for actively collaborating and that this was the very reason for their exile is utterly nonsensical. That is what is known as the Stalinist justification for genocidal practices. This kind of nonsense was not present in your textbooks from the 90s. However, the most recent textbooks present a falsification, sheer nonsense, and an attempt to justify Stalin's genocidal practices against various ethnic groups.
Are you trying to say that you've looked at...
Sasha, I've already stated my position. I've examined both the textbooks from the 90s and the more recent ones. I myself am one of the authors of a school textbook for 7th grade students in Ukraine. For 3 years, I worked as an expert reviewer for textbooks at the Ministry of Education of Ukraine. Therefore, before a textbook can be issued, it is circulated without the authors' names being disclosed so that we are unaware of who the authors are. It is distributed to various experts, and several experts for each textbook then provide an expert assessment detailing what is accurate, what is inaccurate, and so on. Therefore, Alexander, I stand by my statements because I served as an expert on Ukrainian textbooks, and naturally I also took an interest in Russian school textbooks. I compared how various facts are presented in our textbooks versus how they are presented in Russian textbooks. You are free to not believe me, but for that to happen, you would need to read them for yourself.
I wanted to ask you if you've had a chance to read the draft, or whatever it's called, perhaps the preparatory or preliminary version, or something along those lines. The history textbook, which contained information about the deportation, subsequently government officials...
No, it's not a draft. No, it wasn't a draft. Allow me to explain what I mean.
They proceeded to make...
Let me clarify. This was not just a draft, but a fully published textbook. It was already accessible in PDF format, having gone through the printing process and been made available. Therefore, after it was reviewed in Chechnya, officials from the Russian Ministry of Education were summoned and called on the carpet, and this textbook was subsequently reissued.
Reissued it?
Yes, it was already without any justification for Stalin's repressions. In this specific case. In other cases, your textbooks continue to justify Stalin's repressions. However, in this particular instance, because Akhmat Kadyrov has quite a significant influence in Russia, they made concessions and backed down. And in this case, Kadyrov was absolutely right.
Well, it's a positive thing that the disagreement did not develop further than it did.
No, it's not good. In fact, it's quite bad because your textbooks are falsifying historical data, distorting the facts. And they justify Stalin's repressions.
They will be written based on the historical facts that transpired. There was a deportation, and that is an undeniable fact.
Alexander, you don't seem to want to understand me, but that's entirely up to you. Do you have any further questions for me?
Yeah. I can't see the falsification. Facts are there, facts are here, facts are everywhere.
If you can't, then you simply can't. You are unable to.
How should one politically view?
Listeners will get it.
Well, they did make concessions to the Chechen people.
Was that the textbook claimed that the Chechens had extensively collaborated with Nazi Germany? And for the 5th time, I'm telling you that the collaboration percentage among the Chechens was, on average, the same as with other peoples. That's precisely where the falsification was present.
So tell me, please, where do you obtain your information regarding the collaborators from various nations?
Since I'm a historian by training and by profession, I delve into an extensive volume of historical literature. All of my information is meticulously documented with precise references to the relevant authors. The authors present their figures, drawing from archival data. They sit and meticulously calculate everything. And there are mathematical figures, particularly since mathematics is actively applied in the field of history. And from this, they calculated the average collaboration percentage of the occupied peoples with Nazi Germany. And from this, the conclusion is drawn that all statistical figures for collaboration generally fluctuate around the same approximate number. It's approximately between 2.5% and 5% if you're interested in the exact figures.
So it varies by a factor of 2.
Yes, exactly, that's correct. And the Chechens also fit perfectly into this average statistical figure.
So how many Russians were there then? 110 million, correct? 5%, or perhaps 2.5%?
Let's not start making up numbers now and trying to force them to fit our narrative.
Of the 3 million Soviet, or rather ethnic Russian individuals, 3 million people participated in aiding the occupiers.
You are overlooking a crucial detail. While Ukraine's territory was entirely occupied by Nazi Germany, the Russian Federation's territory was not fully occupied, meaning all 110 million Russians were not under occupation. Only a small portion of the European part of the Russian Federation was occupied. Therefore, based on this information...
Less than 2.5.
What? No.
And so you need 2.5.
No, your conclusion is absolutely incorrect. You should not calculate it based on 110 million, but rather on the specific portion of the population that came under occupation. And from that segment, the figure also turns out to be roughly 2.5 to 5%, more or less. There was no active figure, no number that exceeded this particular figure. Everyone collaborated with Nazi Germany to approximately the same extent. You should read up on the Lokot Republic. In Russia, they have completely and deliberately forgotten it.
This isn't the first time I've heard about it, but from what I've been told somehow.
You don't need to be told. Simply open up the specialized literature and read for yourself.
Well, I'm not a historian.
Well, in that case, you should pose your questions to the experts. The specialists can provide you with the answers.
Right, but besides you, there are no specialists here.
Therefore, you should read the literature, do your research, read, and you will develop your own opinion on this particular situation. About the active.
Give it to me in a nutshell, get me interested enough to look it up.
I am referring to the extensive collaboration between ethnic Russians and Nazi Germany. When the Germans advanced into the territory of what is now the Russian Federation in 1941 at that time, it was still Soviet Russia. The Lokot Republic, which was established there, used to be located either in the Oriel province, well, now I'm not sure if it's in Yaroslavl or somewhere else, I'd have to check, yeah. And across this territory, the local administration, entirely made up of communists, was comprised of the heads of village councils, district councils, heads of police, and heads of the NKGB or NKVD. That's right, what they are called. Almost everyone immediately went over to the side of Nazi Germany, and there are tons of German documents. When the Germans recount these events, the combat lieutenants and armored vehicle commanders describe entering this territory. Instead of the red flags bearing stars, hammers, and sickles, they observed tricolor flags prominently displayed throughout the villages, and the police were also standing with tricolor flags. And everyone welcomed the Germans with bread and salt. The Germans, in turn, recognized this Lokot Republic. They had their own armed forces, the RONA. And from the Russian population, specifically ethnic Russians, and drawing upon the RONA armed forces, the 29th Kaminsky Division was established, an SS division. Kaminsky himself was eventually hanged by the Germans for the extensive military atrocities he committed against his own people and against the populations of other nations. From the Germans' perspective, what Bronislaw Kaminsky was doing was worse, even more egregious than their own actions. And they executed him for his crimes against the civilian population. Thus, ethnic Russians welcomed the Germans and actively collaborated with Nazi Germany, with the Wehrmacht, and so on and so forth. But Russians prefer to remain silent about this, yes, to keep silent, not to remember, and so on. You have an individual who is very heavily promoted. The commander of the Second Shock Army, Vlasov, very heavily promoted. That the Vlasovites were scoundrels, collaborators. The ROA fought on the side of Nazi Germany. The first two divisions were created in the spring of 45. The ROA didn't really participate. One division was formed, but the second one never got fully staffed. that particular division. And you,
I saw a figure of 300,000. That was an army of 300,000. That's not 2 divisions.
the army was only truly formed in the spring of 1945, and as a matter of fact, they did not participate in any significant actions, especially when compared to RONA, who were collaborating with the Nazis as early as 1941, while Vlasov's ROA was established in 1940 or fifth year, and it was mostly a paper army. In fact, it wasn't really created or fully established in the true sense. A division was formed under Bunyachenko's command, and this division liberated Prague on May 9, 1945, if you're aware. Prague was liberated from the Nazis by the 1st ROA Division, led by Bunyachenko. The Czech communists themselves extended an invitation to the ROA soldiers, asking them to cleanse Prague of the Nazis, and then promptly surrendered that division, if I recall correctly, to the Soviet forces. Bunyachenko was captured and hanged by the Soviet forces. And you have...
And RONA, are those the white emigres, the ones who...
The RONA consisted of citizens from the Soviet Russian Federation who voluntarily collaborated with the Nazis from 1941 onwards. That's why RONA isn't publicized or discussed there. You promote Vlasov as a supposedly terrible collaborator.
So where did these white gods fight, those Cossacks of Krasnod?
I don't recall exactly where they engaged in combat. I would need to research that information.
Separate units?
Yes, of course, units. They were part of the Wehrmacht.
ROA and RONA existed.
ROA, RONA, Cossack Corps, 2 SS divisions, and I'm not even talking about the so-called Hiwis. These Hiwis were essentially voluntary assistants to the Wehrmacht, individuals who willingly integrated into various units and primarily performed logistical or support tasks. So that indeed happened. Collaborationism is a very diverse phenomenon, yet it falls into the statistics somewhere around 2.5 to 5%, as I mentioned. I might be mistaken. I need to review my records. And the Chechens were no different in this regard, neither positively nor negatively.
No, well, okay, let them be.
Let them be. That's the response of a typical, forgive me, Alexander, Russian chauvinist. That's my personal opinion. You're free to disagree with it.
You're just throwing words around. Do you even understand what they mean?
Of course I understand. You're allowing them to live.
As a simple man, I believe in living peacefully with everyone, if possible.
You speak like a chauvinist saying, let them live. They're already living without your permission anyway.
We opted for a peaceful resolution and we met the Chechen people halfway. Let them live.
Really?
Everything's all right. Just like a real Russian peasant, let them live their lives.
Woohoo.
Okay.
They live just fine without your permission.
Without mine, it's all God's will. All right, thanks. I've got to go.
Go ahead. Check it on Wikipedia. A Russian Christian. Yeah, you should really take some time to read about how your fellow Russians collaborated with the Wehrmacht. And took the RONA flag, not the ROA. The ROA flag was mostly the St. Andrew's flag, which they also adopted. Sorry, the naval flag. Read about it, check the numbers. I could be wrong. There. And to genuinely substantiate this numerical order, I would indeed need to locate my records.